Snow is still falling at 6 in the morning when Daniel pulls into his own driveway and sees an envelope taped to the front door, not in the mailbox. Taped, someone drove out here in this weather on a road that barely qualifies as a road just to make sure he wouldn't miss it.
He already knows what it is before he opens it. He's seen this envelope before, this same shade of borough-issued manila, twice in the 6 years he's lived here. Both times it brought small adjustments, nothing that changed his plans.
Nothing he lost sleep over. This time feels different before he's even touched it. Maybe it's the way it's taped down hard against the wind, like whoever left it wanted to be sure it stayed put. Maybe it's just instinct, the kind that builds up over years of living somewhere that nobody checks on you very often. Daniel built this cabin himself 6 years ago, with his brother and 2 hired hands, hauling logs through a winter that nearly broke all of them for $100,000, give or take, by the time the wiring in the wood stove and the well were finished. Hand-scribed joints, a roof rated for snow loads most builders wouldn't even attempt. The kind of home people stop their trucks to photograph when they pass by, which out here is almost never. He tears open the envelope standing in the snow, gloves still on, because some letters can't wait until you're inside. The number on the page doesn't match the home he built. It barely resembles it, according to the borough, his cabin. The one he can see right in front of him, standing solid, beautiful, throwing smoke from the chimney into a gray sky, is now worth a fraction of what he put into it. Less than half. He reads it twice, then a third time, slower, in case he misread something the first 2 times around. Because here's the part that doesn't make sense yet. His tax bill went up. How does a home become worth less and cost more in the same year on the same piece of paper? That contradiction right there is the whole story. And by the time you understand it, you'll understand why thousands of cabin owners across Alaska are getting letters just like Daniel's right now, this winter, while you're watching this. Some of them built these homes with their own hands. Some inherited them from parents who did the same. None of them expected the math to turn against them this way. Here's the first thing nobody tells you when you buy land in rural Alaska. The person deciding what your home is worth might not have actually seen it in 6 years. Alaska boroughs are required to assess property value every single year. That part sounds reasonable. Annual updates kept current, nothing alarming. But the actual in-person inspection, someone walking the land, checking the structure, looking at what's really there versus what's on file, only has to happen once every 6 years. For 6 years at a stretch, your home's official value can be decided entirely from a desk, using guesswork, outdated photographs, and whatever comparable sales the assessor happens to dig up that season. And in places like where Daniel lives, there often aren't any comparable sales worth using. His nearest neighbor is 4 miles away, through trees, across a creek that floods every spring and freezes solid by November. The next closest cabin sold 11 years ago, to a different kind of buyer, under completely different market conditions, built with different materials, on a different kind of access road. There's no steady stream of listings out here. No Zillow for the backcountry. No app pinging fresh comps every morning the way it would in any subdivision in Anchorage. No reliable way to anchor a fair number to anything real. So the assessor estimates. And estimates, stacked year after year, without anyone setting foot on the property, start to drift further and further from reality, compounding the way bad assumptions always do when nobody checks them. This isn't a fringe theory dreamed up to make a video sound scary. It already happened in Anchorage this year. In the city, with actual recent comparable sales sitting right there for anyone to check. Homeowners opened their assessment notices in January and found their values had jumped 20 to 40% in a single year. Not because their homes changed overnight, because the municipality switched to a different consulting firm, and that firm came back with wildly different numbers for the exact same properties that had been assessed completely differently the year before. One assembly member said it outright on camera, frustration playing in his voice. People on fixed incomes were suddenly looking at tax increases of $1,000 to $3,000 a year, based on a number that nobody in a room could fully explain or defend. Now picture that same volatility, but stripped of every safeguard a city has. No comparable sales to check it against. No neighbors a few doors down to compare notes with over the fence. No quick way to prove a number is wrong, because there's nothing nearby to prove it against. No assembly meeting where someone stands up and says this needs a second look. That's where Daniel lives. That's where his number came from. A formula built for neighborhoods, applied to a place that has none. And here's where it gets worse, because the story doesn't stop at a confusing number. It turns into a trap with two separate jaws, closing from opposite directions at the same time. Alaska doesn't separate the house from the land the way most people instinctively assume it does. The borough assesses full market value, structure and land combined into one figure, and that combined number is exactly what gets taxed. Mill rate times assessed value, divided by 1,000. Simple math on paper. Brutal in practice when the two halves of that equation start moving in opposite directions. Picture two completely different things happening to that single number at the same time, quietly, with no one announcing either one. The structure, the actual cabin, the logs, the roof, the wire in the wood stove, ages the way every physical thing eventually does. A 6-year-old wood stove simply isn't worth what it was new. 6 winters of snow load and freeze-thaw cycles have put real wear on that roof, where an assessor might note even from a satellite photo. On paper, the building itself is worth less, year over year, the same as a car loses value the moment it leaves the lot. But the land underneath that cabin isn't standing still, and almost never moves in the same direction as the structure sitting on it. If that land sits anywhere near a future road project, a subdivision rumor pass around the feed store, a utility expansion, or even just a general drift of people moving into rural Alaska looking for exactly this kind of quiet, the land value can climb fast, sometimes faster than anyone living there even notices. Assessors don't only look at what's there today. They look at what the land could become. Potential, future use, development upside that has nothing to do with the home standing on it right now. So you end up with a structure quietly losing value and land quietly gaining it, both folded into one combined number that the borough hands you with a straight face and a 30-day appeal window. An appeal window most rural owners never even know exists until it's already closed. Daniel's cabin lost value. His land didn't. And because they're bundled together into a single figure, his tax bill went up while his home's worth, on the only paper that legally matters, went down. He didn't lose money on a bad investment he made carelessly. He lost it to a formula he never agreed to and barely understood until the letters showed up taped to his door. Now here's the part that should genuinely worry anyone thinking about buying out there, because it's not about the tax bill anymore. It's about whether anyone would ever buy this place from him at all, no matter what number the borough writes on a piece of paper. Daniel's cabin has no maintained year-round road. The state plows the highway 2 miles away during the day. His half-mile spur road is entirely on him, his shovel, his tractor blade, his own tired back. There's no septic certification on file anywhere a bank would recognize, because the system was built and inspected locally by someone his brother knew, through a process that never generated the kind of paperwork an underwriter expects to see. There's no natural gas line out here, no grid connection a city loan officer would call standard, and off-grid solar and generator setup that most lenders have never seen a form for, let alone approved. None of that makes the cabin unlivable. Daniel's lived in it through 6 full winters, raised 2 kids in it, watched moose cross his front yard from that porch more mornings than he can count. It makes it unmortgageable. 2 very different things that the market treats as identical. Banks don't lend against how a home feels when you walk through the door. They lend against comparable sales, verified legal access, and a paper trail an appraiser can defend in front of a loan committee that's never set foot in Alaska. No maintained road, no recent comps, no standard utility hookups. That's 3 strikes against the file before anyone's even scheduled a tour. Which means if Daniel ever needs to sell, his buyer pool isn't everyone who's ever admired a log cabin online. It's cash buyers only, a much smaller, much more selective group, who know exactly how much leverage they're holding the moment a seller has no other realistic option on the table. Think about what that actually does to a negotiation. A normal home sale has dozens of potential buyers competing, each one able to bid up the price, because financing makes the gap between wanted and can afford it much smaller. Cash-only sales flip that dynamic completely. There might be 3 or 4 serious buyers in an entire region who can write a check for $400,000 without a mortgage, and every one of them knows it. They don't need to compete with each other. They can simply wait lowball and wait again because time is on their side and it isn't on the sellers. A $400,000 cabin, beautiful, structurally sound, sitting on land that's quietly becoming more valuable every passing year, and almost nobody on earth can actually buy it through a normal mortgage. The pool of people who even could buy it shrinks down to almost nothing, and everyone in that small remaining pool knows it. That's the moment it really sinks in for him. Standing in the snow with that letter still in his bare hand, gloves forgotten on the porch rail. It's not that the cabin is worthless. He knows exactly what it's worth, because he built every log of it himself and watched his kids grow up inside it. It's that, on paper, to the borough that taxes it and the banks that would finance it, it might as well be nothing at all. Two completely different realities, both true, both pointing in opposite directions. There's one more piece to this, and it's the one that blindsides people even after they think they've already absorbed the worst of it. Insurance. Insurers price risk the same way banks price risk, by looking for standard things they already understand. A log structure by itself already sits in a different bracket than a conventional stick-built home, because insurers treat solid wood construction as a faster-burning, harder-to-rebuild category. Add in a wood stove as the primary heat source, which most off-grid Alaska cabins rely on, and premiums climb again, because with stoves account for a disproportionate share of rural structure fires every winter. Add in distance from a nearest fire department, sometimes measured in hours rather than minutes, and some insurers won't write a policy at all. The ones who often demand a far higher premium or exclude wildfire and certain weather damage outright. So Daniel isn't just facing a confusing tax bill and a shrinking buyer pool. He's also paying more every year just to keep the place insured at all. For a structure the borough says is depreciating and a piece of land the borough says is appreciating. Three separate systems, three separate sets of assumptions, all colliding on the same four walls, none of them talking to each other, none of them required to agree. So if you're watching this because you're thinking about buying land out here, or because you already have, and this is starting to sound a little too familiar, here's what actually matters beyond the headline. Before you buy anything remote, find out how long it's actually been since an assessor physically walked the property, not just looked at a screen from a borough office. Ask directly. Push for a real answer, not a vague one. If it's been years since anyone set foot on it, budget for that number to move sharply in either direction, without warning and without much explanation when it does. Write that date down. 6 years from now, it's the first thing you'll want to check before opening your own envelope. Check the road, not whether it technically exists, but whether it's maintained by whom, and whether that maintenance is documented anywhere a bank could actually verify it during underwriting. An undocumented gravel spur with no formal maintenance agreement is the single most common reason rural Alaska sales collapse during financing, after the buyer's already fallen in love with the place and started imagining their life there. Get your septic and well inspected and certified through a process that produces real, filed paperwork. Even if local custom says it's unnecessary out here, even if your neighbors never bothered, that paperwork is the entire difference between a financeable home that a normal family can buy and a cash-only property that sits on the market for years waiting for the right buyer to wander past it. It costs a few $100s now. It can save you tens of thousands later, the day you actually need to sell and discover how few people can say yes. And track the land value separately from the structure value every single year, even if you have to do it informally with your own notes and a spreadsheet. If you watch the two start to diverge, structure flat or falling while land climbs, that divergence is your early warning sign that your next tax bill is going to hurt a lot more than your home, on paper, is supposedly worth. Call at least 3 insurers before you sign anything, not after. Ask specifically about wood stove surcharges, distance to fire department thresholds, and whether wildfire or severe weather coverage is included or sold separately as an expensive add-on. A property that looks affordable on the listing page can quietly cost 2 or 3 times more to insure than a comparable home 20 minutes closer to town, and that gap compounds every single year you own it. Get every quote in writing, with the exact policy terms spelled out line by line. Find that number before closing, not after your first renewal notice arrives. None of this means don't buy a log cabin in Alaska. People build extraordinary lives out here, lives most of the country will never experience. It means buy it with your eyes fully open, because the system isn't built to protect you from these numbers. It's built to collect from you regardless of which direction those numbers happen to move in any given year. Here's the twist, though. The part almost nobody talks about, because it doesn't fit the panic-inducing headline. The exact same conditions that make Daniel's cabin nearly impossible to sell make it nearly impossible to take from him, too. No comparable sales nearby means no one can easily prove his assessed number is too low if he decides to peel it down the road. No standard financing available means no aggressive investor crew is showing up next spring to make him a lowball cash offer he feels pressure to accept out of desperation. The very isolation that crushes his resale value on paper is the same isolation that protects the home he actually lives in every single day from the pressures that flip neighborhoods elsewhere. If you're building a forever home, somewhere you genuinely plan to grow old and rather than flip in 5 years for a quick profit, these so-called worthless on-paper properties might be exactly what you actually want. Low resale appeal keeps land prices from getting bid up by speculators chasing the next subdivision. Limited financing options keep developers from showing up with plans to carve your view into 10 lots next door. The very system that makes Daniel's cabin hard to sell to a stranger is the same system that makes a slice of Alaska hard for anyone else to take away from him. He's not moving. He never planned to sell. The letter taped to his door changes the number on his tax bill. It doesn't change the life he's actually built. The wood pile stacked against the north wall, the kid's boot prints frozen into the porch steps, the smoke still curling up from that chimney, exactly the way it has every winter morning for 6 years running. But if you were planning to buy out there as an investment, something you'd flip in 5 years, something you'd lean on as collateral for your next project, something you'd need a clean, defensible appraisal to refinance down the line, this is exactly the trap that's catching people right now, this winter, across rural Alaska, while they're still unpacking boxes and figuring out where the well shut-off valve is. They saw the same listing photos everyone sees, the snow-capped roof, the hand-built porch, the kind of place that looks like it belongs on a magazine cover instead of a tax assessment notice. Nobody warned them about the envelope that shows up 6 years later, taped to the door, with a number that doesn't match the home they fell in love with. Worthless to a bank that's never seen the place. Priceless to the person who's actually standing in the snow looking at it. Same cabin, same letter taped to the same door. 2 completely different outcomes, depending entirely on why you bought it in the first place, and whether you ever plan on selling it at all. Daniel folds a letter, tucks it into his coat pocket, and climbs the porch steps anyway, because a fire inside needs feeding regardless of what any piece of paper says his home is worth. Some things the borough can put a number on, some things it never will. Let me know in the comments if you found this helpful, and subscribe for more videos about how to survive cold winters.